to our next adventure on the Misbehavin' YouTube channel. We've harvested our third round of sweet peppers and are going to make a stuffed pepper soup with a bonus recipe at the end. Here is the recipe, and I'll also leave it in the description box below. This is what the California Wonder variety, just when you slice it up on the inside it is green. The white ones are white on the inside. But that is the California blend is what that one's called. Slice up some of the peppers here. This is one of the California blend. That's the white ones. They stay a little bit smaller. They don't get as big, but they still taste good. And I've already cut a bunch up here, and you can either cut them into strips or you can cut them into smaller pieces, however you like. Some people like the bigger strips in the soup. Some people like the smaller chunks. If I'm going to freeze them, I'll cut them into strips and blanch them and freeze them in the longer strips. Cut out any of these little ribs in there. They're a little more bitter tasting. And there you have it. We have our strips and we have our smaller chunk pieces, and all those still have to be cut up to be frozen. First we're going to brown the ground beef in the soup pot, and then we're going to add the onions and cook it until brown. So we got our 2 pots of ground beef going with the onion in it. We're going to add a little salt, however much you like. I don't put a lot of salt and pepper and stuff, but add as much seasoning as you like. Any different ones, garlic powder, onion powder, anything else you want to add. And then we got 2 different size pots here. So I got a smaller thing of the peppers for the smaller pot, and the larger bowl for the larger pot. I try and make it fun. I try and add anything I can to it, and I basically have a base recipe of the ingredients, but I basically cook to fill up my pot. If I'm going to go through all this work and do all this cooking, I'm going to fill my pot all the way up and get the most out of it that I can. So I cook this on about medium heat. Got them peppers in there. That looks good. Stir them both up. And then we're going to start adding these other ingredients. It's the end of our growing season, so we don't have tomatoes, so we're going to use diced tomatoes. You can use them with the different herbs in them, or you can use plain or whatever you want. We have the tomato sauce, and to thicken it up if we need to, we have the tomato paste. Then we're also going to add purple whole peas, but we don't have any more in the garden, so we're just going to use the canned kind. And we're going to add some corn. And then once we get all the stuff in there, we'll start filling it up with the bouillon cubes. And for every one of these large bouillon cubes, we're going to use 2 cups of water. And we just keep filling it up until the pot gets full. Don't forget minced garlic. I don't really measure anything. Just kind of throw it in there till it looks good. This is a bigger pot. Put a little bit more in this one. Give it some good flavors. Okay, so we got the peppers and the onions and the ground beef and a little bit of seasonings in here. And now we're going to start adding all the good stuff. So we're going to add diced tomatoes. This pot's a little bigger, so it's going to take a little bit more than the other pot. We're going to add sauce. so we're going to add some more diced tomatoes. This one's plain, no seasonings in it. This is a naturally stem peeled diced tomatoes in a sauce. And then one more can in the bigger pot. Then we're going to add our purple hull peas because we don't have any more in the garden, so we're going to just add it in here. I'm going to leave the water in there because it'll add more water to the soup, which I don't have to add with the bouillons later. These are really good in soup. Then we got some corn. Same thing, I'm not going to drain it. I'm going to keep the water, use it for the soup. Corn, and then I go through the refrigerator and the cupboard and find out anything else I can add on cans that are going to expire, or these tomatoes need to be used, so I'm going to add those to the soup and use those up. Then we're going to put a little bit of the paste in, tomato paste. And then start adding our beef bouillon cubes with the water. So we'll put 1 bouillon cube and 2 cups of water. And we'll keep doing that till we fill up both pots. Be back soon. I found some green beans left over from the garden that we're going to add in too. Keep adding our beef bouillon and 2 cups of water. And we keep going until the pots get filled up. Stir that down a little bit, mix it up. And we keep going. Then when we get them both full, we let it simmer for several hours. The longer you let it simmer, the more the flavors are going to cook in. Yummy! Frozen and all. Put them right in there. This soup is so fun to make. Add everything you got that needs to be cooked up. Okay, so here we are still adding more water to the pots, but we're getting up there with the bouillon cubes. Look at all this deliciousness in here. Still adding more water. And we're going to get that to a boil, and then we're going to turn it down to simmer. We're going to go ahead and add some seasonings, Italian seasoning and parsley flakes. More seasonings the better, in my opinion. Get some parsley in there. Pretty big pot of soup, so might want extra seasoning. And then we're going to add some more salt and pepper. And let that keep cooking. Looking good. Look at all those yummy vegetables. Too bad they're not homegrown tomatoes. Too late in the season. Depending on how much oil you like in your food, which I am not 100% fan of it, I come through and scrape off some of the big oil on the top that comes from the meat. And if you can see it pooling on there, you just kind of scrape off some of it to get some of it out of there. This pot looks fuller. So it's still cooking. We got it on a simmer. Got all those yummy vegetables. And then when we get to about a half an hour out, we'll add the corn on the cob to the soup. Alright, now our soup has been simmering for a couple hours. And we're going to add the corn on the cob. You can leave this part out, but it makes a little bit extra if you want to just have a piece of corn, full corn, with your meal. And we'll cook this for another half an hour on simmer or so before we serve it. And you just put a bowl of soup, dip out one of these corns in each serving, and serve it with cornbread. Doesn't get any better than that. Won't be long now. And there you have it, stuffed pepper soup. And this version that I videoed has a lot of extras in it, like corn, pink eye purple hull peas, anything that you got in the cupboard or the refrigerator that needs to be used up. Here we have it, the final product. 19 big soup containers and 4 small ones. It's such good stuff, my neighbor came by and got 2 big containers before I could finish filling them all. Alright, so here we go with our bonus recipe for this video. It is cornbread that goes awesome with the stuffed pepper soup. So it's very easy to make. Normally the recipe that I'm going to post is a full recipe, but I only have 1 can of the corn muffin mix, so we're going to half it because the full recipe takes 2. So we're halving everything, so we put in our half a stick of butter that's softened. It makes it much easier to mix. Half a cup sour cream, which came from here. Normally use a whole can of sweet style cream corn. We're only going to use half because we're halving the recipe. So I get another box of mix, we'll make the whole thing. Add a box of Jiffy corn mix. The recipe, full recipe calls for 2, but we're making half. The butter in there, and it calls for 3 eggs. So 1.5 eggs, a little tricky, but we'll do the 1. And we'll just use the whites out of this, and we'll save the yolk and make some deviled eggs later. We'll save that for later. Now, it is as simple as that, mixing it all together. Add a little bit of salt. Mix it all together. And then once this is nice and mixed, we just spray the cooking pan that we're going to put it in to make the cornbread. And then we will bake it. Now this cornbread recipe I like a lot. I got it from my aunt, Susan. And the reason why I like it is because I don't really care for the gritty cornbread. It's too gritty. And the sour cream in this really helps it out a lot. Makes it a lot more moist, less gritty. Just want to mix that up pretty good in there. That's why you want the butter softened, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to mix it so good. And it's ready to go in the pan. So if you're making the full recipe, you would use the 9 by 13 casserole dish, but I'm only making half, so I got an 8 by 8 here. We just want to put the spray in it so it doesn't stick as much when we go to take it out. And one last stir and mix it all in there. And sometimes I'll make this Texas style and I'll put in some cooked roasted red peppers and some diced green chilies in it. Adds a little bit to it. But most of the time we just make it just like this. Great recipe, and it goes really good with stuffed pepper soup. Better than the rice, I think. Most people put white rice in it, but I like it much better with this cornbread recipe. All right, it's ready to go in the oven. 375 degrees. When you do a big dish of it, it usually takes 35 minutes. This might take a little bit less because it's a smaller dish. We'll just have to check on it. And here it is, plated up and ready to serve. Put you a dollop of butter on the cornbread and have at it.